Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the only SSS-Rank adventurer who stood equal to Freya and Loki, Naruto x Freya x Loki, DanMachi. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Stranger from Beyond. Crimson moonlight filtered through the jagged tear in reality, illuminating a figure that fell from nothing into something. Naruto Uzumaki crashed into the unfamiliar forest floor, his body creating a small crater amid ancient trees that had never known chakra until this moment. Blood-matted golden hair caught what little light penetrated the canopy as he lay motionless. Save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the dimensional rift above him pulsed once, twice, then sealed itself with a sound like shattered glass being reassembled. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came pain, familiar, almost comforting in its reliability. Then scent, earth and vegetation, but wrong somehow, carrying unfamiliar undertones. Finally, memory flowed back in a torrent that made physical agony seem merciful by comparison. Everyone, he whispered to the indifferent darkness, voice cracking not from his injuries but from the weight of what he'd witnessed. Madara, Kagaya, the 10 Tails. A war they'd thought won, until the dimensional rifts began appearing. His friends falling one by one. Sasuke's final technique to send him away as their world literally tore itself apart. The last Uzumaki, now possibly the last shinobi of any kind, had been cast adrift between realities with nothing but his skills, his grief, and the dormant presence of Kurama sealed within him. When he finally forced his eyes open, stars unfamiliar to any shinobi gazed back at him from between the branches. Even the air tasted foreign on his tongue, thicker with magic than chakra. Infused with energies that danced across his senses like curious children encountering something new. I made it somewhere, at least, Naruto muttered, pushing himself to his feet despite multiple broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder. The pain barely registered, he'd endured far worse. With practiced movements, he slammed his shoulder against a nearby tree, grinding his teeth as the joint popped back into place. Moonlight caught the glint of his scratched forehead protector, perhaps the last remaining symbol of Konoha in any dimension. With mechanical precision, he inventoried his remaining tools, a handful of kunai, some shuriken, 3 paper bombs, and his nearly depleted reserves of chakra. Kurama remained silent within him, likely conserving energy after the dimensional transition. Great first step in a new world, he said to no one, his attempt at humor falling flat even to his own ears. Get your bearings, find civilization, figure out where, and when, you are. Standard shinobi protocol for being stranded in unknown territory. Except no protocol existed for being stranded in an unknown dimension while everyone you've ever known or loved had been erased from existence. The forest offered no answers, only the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. Naruto closed his eyes, gathering what little natural energy he could access. Sage mode came reluctantly in. This strange place, the nature chakra here possessed qualities he'd never encountered before. It flowed differently, resisted his pull, yet eventually submitted to his will. The familiar orange pigmentation appeared faintly around his eyes as he extended his senses. There, several kilometers north, a massive concentration of life forces. A city, perhaps, though something about the energy signatures felt off. Some burned brighter than any chakra he'd ever sensed, while others carried a strange duality he couldn't quite interpret. Better than wandering aimlessly, he decided, setting off at a measured pace that belied his injuries. The forest gradually thinned, giving way to rolling plains under the watchful gaze of an enormous white tower in the distance. As he approached, walls came into view. Massive fortifications surrounding what appeared to be a sprawling city built in concentric rings around a central tower. More curious were the scattered ruins he passed, ancient structures had bore architectural elements vaguely reminiscent of temples he'd seen in the Land of Iron. The moon had begun its descent when Naruto paused atop a hill overlooking the city. Lights still burned within, suggesting either a settlement that never slept or one currently celebrating some festival. The wall appeared well guarded, with sentries patrolling at regular intervals along its length. No Hittite, strange clothes. No identification, he murmured, assessing his odds of peaceful entry. Not exactly starting off on the right foot here. A sharp cry pierced the night, drawing his attention to a commotion near a side gate. Squinting, he made out several figures, humanoid monsters with grotesque features, surrounding what appeared to be merchants whose wagon had broken down outside the city walls. The guards atop the wall had noticed too, but seemed hesitant to leave their posts. Naruto sighed. Some things, apparently, remained constant across dimensions. Guess this is one way to make a first impression. Chelsea Marbrand had made many poor decisions in her 35 years of life. Becoming a merchant who transported rare herbs from the forest south of Orario might not have been her worst choice. But as she stared at the 5 drooling killer ants surrounding her broken-down wagon, it certainly felt like a contender. "Stay behind me," she hissed to her apprentice, a gangly 16-year-old boy named Elwin who looked ready to faint. The rusty sword in her hand, more a tool for clearing brush than an actual weapon, trembled slightly as the first ant clicked its mandibles and advanced. The guards were shouting something from atop the wall, probably about reinforcements, but reinforcements would arrive long after she and Elwin had been reduced to scattered pieces across the road. "Might as well die with dignity," she muttered, raising her makeshift weapon. The lead ant lunged, and then simply wasn't there anymore. A yellow flash momentarily blinded her, followed by the sound of chitin cracking. When her vision cleared, a stranger stood between her and the monsters, his back to her as he faced the remaining creatures. Blood-stained bandages wrapped his right arm, and his orange-black clothing was torn in several places, yet he stood with absolute stillness, like a blade waiting to fall. "Get to the gate," he said without turning, his voice carrying an accent she'd never heard before. "I'll handle this." Before Chelsea could respond, 2 ants attacked simultaneously. The stranger moved with impossible speed, ducking beneath snapping mandibles. Drive what looked like a strange knife into the first creature's head. The second ant's pincers closed on empty air as he somehow appeared behind it, slamming a spiraling sphere of blue light into T's thorax that pulverized its exoskeleton and sent viscera spraying across the road. "What in the name of the gods?" Elwin whispered beside her. The remaining ants seemed to hesitate, their primitive intelligence recognizing the threat this human represented. It made no difference. The stranger formed a cross with his fingers, and suddenly there were 3 of him, perfect copies that attacked in flawless coordination. Within seconds, the monsters lay in twitching pieces on the ground. The duplicates vanished in puffs of smoke as the man turned toward them. Chelsea gasped involuntarily. Despite the blood and dirt smeared across his features, she could see he was young, perhaps early 20s, with striking blue eyes and unusual whisker-like marks on his cheeks. Most notable was his expression, not the triumph or bloodlust she'd seen in adventurers after a kill, but a wary assessment tinged with something that looked disconcertingly like grief. "Are you hurt?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. "And no," Chelsea managed, lowering her useless sword. "You saved our lives. I've never seen anyone move like that. Are you a high-level adventurer? Which familia do you belong to?" The stranger's brow furrowed slightly at her questions. "Familia? I'm not. I just arrived here. What city is this?" Before she could answer, shouts announced the arrival of guards from the gate, weapons drawn as they approached cautiously. The stranger tensed, his hand moving slightly toward his strange knives before he deliberately relaxed his posture. "This is Orario," Chelsea said quickly, stepping forward. "The Labyrinth City, and you've just saved 2 of its citizens, so perhaps we can return the favor." From her vantage point in Babel Tower, the goddess Freya observed the curious scene unfolding at the east gate through a silver mirror that showed far more than mere physical appearances. Her perfect features remained composed, but a spark of genuine interest lit her kaleidoscopic eyes for the first time in decades. "My lady, Ottar," her loyal Boaz captain, inquired from where he stood at attention nearby. "Something new has entered our little game," Freya murmured, a finger tracing the mirror's ornate frame. "A soul I've never seen before, and cannot read clearly." That alone would have been remarkable. As the goddess of beauty, Freya could see into any mortal's soul, discerning their truest nature with a glance. This stranger at the gate appeared as though veiled behind a crimson haze, his soul partially obscured by something ancient and powerful that coiled protectively around his essence. "Shall I have him brought to you?" Ottar asked, ever efficient. "No." Freya's lips curved into a subtle smile. "I want to watch this one find his way first. Have Alan follow him discreetly. I wish to know where he goes, who he speaks with, and what he is capable of." Ottar bowed deeply. "As you command." When her captain had departed, Freya leaned closer to the mirror, studying the stranger's features. Golden hair, blue eyes that had witnessed too much for their years, and a presence that seemed to bend the very faint lines she could perceive around most mortals. "Who are you?" she whispered to the image, "that you can hide yourself from a goddess's sight?" The guild building hummed with its usual morning activity, adventurers collecting quests, exchanging monster crystals for coin, and sharing information about dungeon conditions. Misha Flott stifled a yawn as she sorted paperwork at her counter, trying not to think about the 3 more hours remaining in her shift. "Excuse me." She looked up to find a stranger standing before her desk. Tall, blonde, with curious whisker markings on his cheeks and bandages visible beneath his torn clothing. Something in his bearing immediately captured her full attention. Despite his disheveled appearance, he carried himself with the quiet confidence she typically associated with first-tier adventurers. "Welcome to the guild," she said, shifting into her professional mode. "How may I assist you today?" "I need information," he said, his accent unfamiliar to her ears. "I'm new to Orario." Me. Archant named Telsey suggested I come here." "Ah, you must be the one who saved her from monsters last night." "Word travels quickly." Misha smiled warmly. "The guild handles registration for adventurers, provides information about the dungeon, and serves as an intermediary between adventurers and the various familias." The stranger nodded slowly. "I'm not sure I fully understand your system. Where I come from, things work differently." Quote, "You're from outside the city." "Far outside, I'm guessing from your accent." She pulled out some standard information pamphlets. "Well, the basics are simple enough. The gods have descended from the divine realm to live among mortals. They grant their blessing, what we call fauna, to those who join their familia. This blessing allows adventurers to grow stronger by gaining experience in the dungeon." "Gods," he repeated, something flickering behind his eyes that Misha couldn't interpret. "Actual deities, yes, though they've sealed most of their divine powers to live in our world. They're quite real, there are dozens in Orario alone." The stranger absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "And everyone who adventures belongs to one of these familias?" "Typically, yes. The fauna is necessary to develop stats and abilities beyond normal human limitations. Without it, entering the dungeon would be suicide for most." Misha tilted her head curiously. "Those monsters you defeated last night, you don't have a blessing, do you?" "No," he confirmed. "Where I'm from, we develop our abilities differently." That piqued her professional interest. "Really? That's quite unusual. Would you mind, Misha?" A firm voice interrupted as Aina Tool approached the counter, her half-elf features composed but alert. "I'll handle this visitor. Please cover Misha's counter for a while," she told her colleague. The subtle tension in Aina's shoulders told Misha this wasn't a casual reassignment. She nodded, gathering her papers as Aina turned to the stranger. "I'm Aina Tool, Senior Guild Advisor. Perhaps we could speak in a consultation room. It would be more comfortable." The blonde man studied her briefly, then nodded. "Lead the way." As Misha moved to another counter, she watched them disappear into one of the private rooms, wondering what about this unusual foreigner had caught her superior's attention. Inside the consultation room, Aina closed the door before taking a seat across from the mysterious visitor. The chamber's privacy enchantments activated automatically, ensuring their conversation wouldn't be overheard. Standard procedure for sensitive discussions with adventurers, though this particular meeting felt anything but standard. "First, I should thank you for saving our citizens last night," she began, maintaining her professional demeanor despite her curiosity. "Telsey Marbrand is well respected in Orario." "It was nothing," he replied, his posture relaxed yet somehow ready, like a coiled spring. "Anyone would have helped, perhaps, but not anyone could have dispatched 5 killer ants without a weapon or fauna." Aina placed a folder on the table between them. Which brings us to more complicated matters. I'm authorized to speak frankly with you because the guild prefers addressing unusual situations directly rather than allowing rumors to spread unchecked. The stranger's eyes, a star, chillingly clear blue, studied her with surprising intensity. That seems wise. Several witnesses described your abilities last night. Creating duplicates, moving at impossible speeds, and manifesting some kind of energy attack. Aina kept her tone neutral. These aren't typical skills even for blessed adventurers, let alone someone without a falna. I understand your concern. He leaned forward slightly. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm not from anywhere you'd recognize. My abilities come from training in arts developed in my homeland. And where exactly is this homeland? Naruto paused, seeming to weigh his options. Very far away, somewhere you can't reach by conventional travel. The implication hung in the air between them. Aina had worked at the guild long enough to recognize when someone was carefully navigating around a truth too complicated or dangerous to state directly. I see. She made a notation in her file. Well, Mr. Uzumaki, Orario has seen its share of travel. RS from distant lands with unique skills. However, our laws require all residents to register with the guild, and those who display combat abilities generally join a familia for their own protection. I'm not interested in joining any organization at this time, he said firmly. I've only just arrived and need to understand this world better first. This world, Aina echoed, catching his slip. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Figure of speech. Everything here is very different from my home. Indeed, Aina decided to change tactics. The guild can provide temporary residency papers, but without familia affiliation. Your options in Orario will be limited. The gods take great interest in individuals with unusual talents. Something like resignation crossed his features. They always do. That response intrigued Aina more than anything else he'd said. Perhaps we can reach a compromise. The guild occasionally employs independent contractors for certain matters. It would provide you with legitimate status while you acclimate to Orario. What kind of matters? Naruto asked, wariness evident in his voice. Nothing nefarious, Aina assured him. Escort missions for guild personnel, security for certain events. Specific retrieval tasks that don't require deep dungeon exploration. In exchange, we provide housing allowance, basic necessities, and most importantly, a buffer between you and overly curious parties. The blonde considered this for several moments. There would be no commitment to any god or goddess. None. You would answer only to the guild, which maintains neutrality among the familias. Then I accept your offer, Naruto said with a decisive nod. Though I should mention I'll need somewhere to train regularly. My abilities require consistent practice. That can be arranged. The guild maintains several training facilities on the outskirts of the city. Aina produced the necessary paperwork. Now, we'll need to create an official record. Beyond your name, what skills should we list? Naruto's lips quirked slightly. Not quite a smile, but the closest approximation she'd seen from him. Just put, strategic combat specialist. That covers enough without saying too much. As Aina completed the forms, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was documenting only the barest surface of a much deeper mystery. The hostess of Fertility Bustle. D with its evening crowd. A mix of adventurers celebrating successful dungeon runs, merchants conducting after-hours business, and various city dwellers seeking good food and better company. Situated in northwest Orario, the establishment had earned its reputation through exceptional cuisine and the unspoken understanding that its staff could handle themselves should trouble arise. Naruto sat at a corner table, nursing a drink that tasted vaguely like sake but carried unfamiliar herbal notes. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of adjustments, learning Orario's geography, currency, social structures, and the complex politics between familias. The small apartment the guild had arranged for him provided basic comfort, but offered little distraction from memories that ambushed him in quieter moments. His attention shifted as a green-haired animal person, the proper term here was chianthrope, he'd learned, approached with his food order. Meat pasta with extra servings, she announced cheerfully, placing the steaming plate before him. You know, this is usually enough for 2 people. I have a high metabolism, Naruto replied with a polite nod. Thank you, Chloe, she supplied, her tail swishing with interest as she studied him. "You're the new guy everyone's talking about. The one who works directly for the guild without a familia." Word traveled quickly in Orario, apparently. "That's me. Well, if you need anything else, just wave." She winked before sauntering off to another table. Naruto had just taken his first bite when a commotion erupted near the entrance. 3 burly adventurers, humans wearing matching armor with a boar insignia, had surrounded a slender, hooded figure. "Hey, come on, just have a drink with us," the largest one insisted, blocking the hooded person's path to the exit. "Ganesha Familia won their exhibition match today. We're celebrating. I've declined twice now," came a cool feminine voice from beneath the hood. "Please move aside. Don't be like that. We're just being friendly." Another adventurer reached for her arm. The woman sidestepped with graceful efficiency, but the third man had positioned himself to cut off her retreat. The tavern had grown quieter. Patrons watching with the wary anticipation of those who recognized brewing trouble but hesitated to involve themselves. Naruto set down his fork. Interfering wasn't wise. He was still learning local customs and had no desire to draw further attention. Yet something in the woman's posture, the controlled tension in her movements, reminded him painfully of Akura when she'd been harassed in civilian villages during missions. Before he could decide, the largest adventurer grabbed the woman's hood, pulling it back to reveal striking features and golden green hair. "See, pretty elf like you shouldn't hide." He never finished his sentence. The woman moved with startling speed, driving her palm into his sternum with enough force to send him crashing into a nearby table. The other 2 adventurers reacted instantly, one drawing a short sword while the other activated what appeared to be a magic enhancement on his gauntlets. "You'll regret that, knife ears," the swordsman growled. Naruto stood, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound drew all eyes to him as he crossed the room with deliberate, unhurried steps. 3 against 1 seems unbalanced, he observed, positioning himself beside the elf woman. "Especially when you started the trouble. Stay out of this, outsider," the adventurer with glowing gauntlets warned. "This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern." Naruto kept his voice level, his hands relaxed at his sides. "Walk away now, and everyone keeps their dignity intact." The first adventurer had regained his feet, rubbing his chest where the woman had struck him. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. We're level 2s from Ganesha Familia." "I don't know what that means," Naruto admitted honestly. "But I do know when someone's being disrespectful to a lady who's clearly not interested." A tense silence fell over the tavern. The adventurers exchanged glances, apparently reassessing the situation. Something in Naruto's demeanor must have given them pause, or perhaps it was the tavern's silver-haired owner who had emerged from the kitchen, a dangerous glint in her eye. "Fine," the leader finally spat. "Not worth the trouble anyway. Come on, boys." As they skulked toward the door, the one with gauntlets turned back. "We'll remember your face, outsider." When they'd gone, Naruto turned to the elf woman, who was straightening her hood with composed movements. Up close, he noticed her eyes, a deep blue that held both caution and something like professional assessment. "You didn't need my help," he acknowledged. "But sometimes having backup prevents things from escalating." A fair observation. Her voice carried the musical quality he'd noticed was common to elves in this world. I'm curious why a stranger would involve himself in another's affairs." Naruto shrugged. "Old habit." The woman studied him for a moment longer. "You're the independent contractor the guild recently registered. The one they're calling the foreigner with unusual magic. Word really does travel fast here." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Orario thrives on information as much as dungeon crystals." She inclined her head slightly. "My thanks for your intervention, unnecessary though it may have been." "My name is Ryu Lion. Naruto Uzumaki." He returned the formal nod she'd offered. "Would you like to join me? I ordered too much food, and I've found eating alone in a new city can get lonely." Ryu hesitated, clearly weighing his invitation against whatever errand had brought her to the tavern. "I suppose I could spare a few minutes. I know the owner here quite well." As they returned to his table, Naruto noticed the silver-haired owner watching them with undisguised interest. When their eyes met, she gave him an approving nod before returning to the kitchen. "Mia Grand doesn't offer her approval easily," Ryu commented as they sat. You've made a favorable impression. I've found that respecting people's boundaries usually leads to better first impressions than forcing them into unwanted interactions, Naruto replied, pushing a portion of his pasta toward her. Though I'm still learning how things work here. You truly are from far away, then. It wasn't a question. Your manner of speech and some of your expressions suggest no region one recognize. Naruto took a sip of his drink. Let's just say I'm from somewhere well beyond the known maps. Fair enough. We all have our secrets. Ryu sampled the pasta, her movements precise and elegant. The guild rarely takes on independent contractors. You must possess unusual skills. I get by. Naruto deflected, not yet ready to discuss his abilities openly. What about you? Those were some impressive reflexes earlier. Ryu's expression revealed nothing. I've had some training. They fell into silence then, each recognizing the other's reluctance to share personal details. It was a comfortable silence, though, the kind that forms between people who understand the value of privacy. After several minutes, Ryu spoke again. If you're seeking to understand Orario better, I could provide some guidance. I've lived here many years and know the city's less obvious aspects. I'd appreciate that, Naruto said, genuine gratitude in his voice. The guild advisor, Aina, has been helpful, but I suspect her information is somewhat official. Precisely. Ryu's eyes held a hint of amusement. The guild presents Orario's authorized version. Reality is more complex. It always is. Naruto's mind flashed to Konoha's official histories versus what he'd learned about its darker corners. When would be convenient for you? I work evenings here at the hostess. Mornings would be best. He finished her portion and stood gracefully. Shall we say tomorrow, 9th bell, at Central Park Fountain? I'll be there. Naruto nodded. As Ryu departed, her hood once again concealing her features, Naruto found himself experiencing the first genuine moment of peace since his arrival in this world. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was a connection, something to anchor himself to this new ray. Liddy where gods walked among mortals and monsters lurked beneath the labyrinthine city. He returned to his meal, unaware of the pair of mismatched eyes watching him from a darkened corner of the tavern. The north main street of Orario came alive with early commerce as Loki, goddess of mischief, lounged against a storefront, appearing to any observer like a lanky, red-headed teenager rather than a divine being older than civilization itself. Her perpetually narrowed eyes tracked the blonde foreigner as he navigated the morning crowd with the instinctive grace of a trained fighter. Interesting specimen, ain't he? She mused to the tall, green-haired elf woman beside her. Not often we get completely unknown quantities dropping into our playground. Riveria Lyo's Alf, executive of Loki F. Amelia and perhaps the most powerful mage in Orario, observed the subject of her goddess's interest with measured assessment. He carries himself like someone accustomed to combat, but not in the style of any adventurer I've encountered. That's because he ain't an adventurer, not properly, anyway. Loki grinned, hands folded behind her head in her characteristic pose. No fauna, no familia, just raw whatever he is. Practically blasphemous. You find blasphemy entertaining, Loki-sama, Riveria noted dryly. Guilty as charged. The goddess chuckled. But seriously, a mortal who can take down monsters without a blessing. That's worth investigating, especially when Freya's little pets are skulking around after him too. Riveria's keen eyes had already noted the white-haired cat person Tr. Ailing Naruto from a distance. Alan Frommel, one of Freya Familia's executives. It seems we're not the only ones with questions. Course not. Freya never could resist a shiny new toy. Loki's expression sharpened despite her casual tone. Find out what makes this one tick, Riveria. If he's valuable, I want first dibs before that chest-padded glamour goddess gets her claws in him. The high elf inclined her head slightly. I'll assign Makoto to make contact. Her background gives us a plausible connection to someone from the Far East. Perfect. Subtle but effective. That's why you're my favorite, Riveria-chan. Please refrain from using such familiar terms, the elf replied with the long-suffering patience of one who knew such requests were futile. Loki merely grinned wider before her attention snapped back to Naruto, who had paused at a fruit vendor's stall. You know what's really interesting? The way he sometimes talks to himself when he thinks no one's looking. Almost like he's not quite alone in there. Riveria frowned slightly. A manifestation of his unique magic, perhaps. Maybe. Loki's eyes gleamed with predatory curiosity. Or maybe our mysterious stranger is Ying something more interesting than just unusual abilities. Wouldn't that be fun? Central Park offered a rare expanse of greenery amid Orario's urban landscape. Morning dew still clung to the grass as Naruto approached the ornate fountain where Ryu Lion waited, her hood down in the gentle sunlight. Without the tavern's dim lighting, he could better appreciate the delicate features typical of elves in this world. Though hers carried a weathered quality that spoke of experiences beyond her apparent age. "Good morning," he greeted, stopping at a respectful distance. "You're precisely on time," she observed. Something like approval in her tone. "Shall we walk?" Movement often makes conversation flow more naturally. They set off along a winding path bordered by flowering bushes, maintaining a comfortable silence until they'd left the more populated areas behind. "I should clarify my offer," Ryu began without preamble. "While I'm willing to help you understand Orario, I'd prefer an exchange rather than charity. Information for information." Naruto appreciated her directness. "Seems fair. What would you like to know?" "Let's start with something simple. The abilities you've demonstrated. They're not magic as we understand it in Orario, are they?" "No," Naruto confirmed after brief consideration. "Where I come from, we call it chakra, a blend of physical and spiritual energy. Everyone has it, but not everyone learns to manipulate it." "Interesting. Here, magic stems from the Falna, the blessing bestowed by gods." Ryu gestured to a less traveled path. "Which raises he question of how you perform such feats without divine blessing." Naruto chose his words carefully. "Chakra manipulation is taught from childhood where I'm from. It becomes as natural as breathing. The techniques I use were developed over generations. A system of power completely independent of divine influence," Ryu mused. "I can see why that might concern certain parties in Orario. Is that why I've had shadows following me since I arrived? I counted 3 different ones yesterday alone." Ryu's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise he'd seen from her. "You noticed them?" "Detecting surveillance was basic training where I grew up," Naruto said with a shrug. "Though I admit, the cat person was quite skilled." A ghost of a smile touched Ryu's lips. "Alan Frommel of Freya Familia. His presence suggests you've caught the attention of one of Orario's most powerful goddesses." "And what does that mean for me?" "It depends on her interest. Freya collects exceptional individuals like rare gemstones. Sometimes she merely observes. Other times, she pursues with singular focus." Naruto processed this information, remembering Aina's warning about gods taking interest in unique abilities. And the others, the elf woman with red hair, and the human girl in Eastern clothing. The first would be Riveria Lyo's Alf, executive of Loki Familia. The second is likely Yamato Makoto, a newer member of the same familia. Ryu guided them toward a secluded bench overlooking a small pond. "Loki and Freya are eternal rivals. If one shows interest in something, or someone, the other inevitably investigates." "Great," Naruto muttered. "Divine politics already. You speak as though you have experience with divine beings," Ryu observed carefully. Naruto fell silent, memories of the Sage of Six Paths, Kagaya, and the tailed beasts flashing through his mind. "Let's just say I've encountered my share of entities with godlike power, and it rarely ended simply." Ryu seemed to accept this vague answer, turning her gaze to the pond's surface where colorful fish darted beneath water lilies. "You should understand something about Orario's gods. Despite sealing most their divine powers to live among mortals, they remain fundamentally different from us. They experience boredom on a scale we can scarcely imagine, having existed for eons. Mortal affairs, our struggles, achievements, even our deaths, are ultimately entertainment to many of them. Not so different from gods in stories from my homeland," Naruto said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Playing games with mortal lives. Some are better than others," Ryu acknowledged. "But never forget their fundamental nature, even when they appear benevolent." They sat in contemplative silence for several minutes before Naruto spoke again. "Your turn. What's your story, Ryu? You move like someone trained for combat, yet you work in a tavern." The elf's expression remained composed, but something in her eyes closed off. I was once an adventurer. Now I am not. The reasons are personal. Naruto recognized the boundary she'd drawn and respected it. Fair enough. I can tell you that He hostess of fertility employs several former adventurers, she added after a moment. Mia Grand, the owner you met last night, was once among the strongest in Orario. Her tavern provides a second life for those who wish to step away from the dungeon. A place for second chances, Naruto murmured, finding unexpected comfort in the concept. I can understand the appeal of that. Ryu studied him with perceptive eyes. You speak like someone who has lost much. Everything, he admitted quietly, the word escaping before he could contain it. She didn't offer empty consolations or press for details. And Naruto appreciated her silence more than any words she might have chosen. They watched the fish moving in their peaceful world beneath the surface, two souls carrying their separate burdens in comfortable proximity. The guild will assign you missions soon, Ryu said eventually. When they do, be cautious. The guild maintains neutrality officially, but individual members have connections to various familias. Some may seek to test your capabilities or place you in situations that reveal the extent of your abilities. Thanks for the warning. I figured something like that might happen. If you need reliable information or assistance, Ryu added with slight hesitation, you can find me at the hostess most evenings. Naruto smiled, his first genuine smile since arriving in this world. I appreciate that more than you know. As they walked back toward the park's entrance, Naruto felt Kurama stirring within him for the first time since their arrival. This world has an odd flavor to its energy. The fox's deep voice rumbled in his mind. The gods here are mere shadows of beings like Kagaya, but their influence permeates everything. Be wary, Naruto. I was wondering when you'd wake up. Naruto replied silently. Any insights about how our chakra works here? It functions, but differently. The natural energy here responds to you, but it's reluctant. As if it already answers to other masters. Their internal conversation was interrupted as Ryu paused at a crossroads. I have errands to attend to now. Remember what I said about the gods, attention. In Orario, being exceptional is both an advantage and a danger. I'll keep that in mind. Naruto bowed slightly in the manner of his homeland. Until next time, Ryu. As they parted ways, Naruto felt the weight of unseen eyes following him, the now familiar sensation of being observed by multiple parties. Rather than evade them as he had previously, he decided on a different approach. If they wanted to see what he could do, perhaps it was time for a controlled demonstration. The training grounds assigned to Naruto by the guild lay on Orario's eastern outskirts, a walled courtyard attached to a disused watchtower. The facility had seen better days, with cracked flagstones and weathered target dummies arranged around its perimeter, but it offered privacy and space enough for his purposes. Or at least, it would have offered privacy had he not detected at least 4 observers concealed at various vantage points around the grounds. He recognized Alan's presence from Freya Familia, along with someone from Loki's group. The others were unfamiliar, but their careful positioning suggested professional surveillance. Putting on a show, Kit? Kurama asked, amusement coloring his mental voice. Just enough to satisfy their curiosity without revealing everything, Naruto replied. Better to control what they learn than have them catch me by surprise later. He began with basic warm-up exercises, movements that would appear ordinary to observers unfamiliar with shinobi training regimens. Only after 20 minutes of this did he move to the center of the courtyard, forming a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he said clearly, purposely announcing the technique for his audience's benefit. 5 perfect duplicates appeared around him in puffs of smoke, each identical down to the smallest detail. Unlike illusions, these clones cast shadows, disturbed the dust on the ground with their movements, and could interact physically with their surroundings. Without verbal communication, the clones dispersed to different areas of the training ground. 2 began sparring with taijutsu movements, carefully keeping their speed just beyond what an elite athlete might achieve. Another practiced shuriken throws at a target dummy, while the 4th began a chakra control exercise by walking up the vertical wall of the watchtower. The final clone sat cross-legged, entering a meditative state to gather natural energy. The original Naruto moved to a clear space and began forming a Rasengan, allowing his observers to see the process of chakra manipulation. As the spiraling sphere took shape in his palm. Once formed, he drove it into a stone block that had been placed as a striking target. The dense material exploded into dust and fragments, leaving a circular depression in the ground beneath. He sensed a spike of surprise from his hidden audience, followed by intense interest. Good. He'd given them something to report without revealing his full capabilities. No need to display Sage Mode, Kurama's chakra, or his more devastating techniques. For the next hour, Naruto maintained this controlled demonstration, occasionally introducing new elements like water walking or basic wind manipulation, but keeping everything within the parameters he defined for himself. Let them see him as formidable but comprehensible, a unique talent rather than an existential anomaly. When he finally dispersed his clones, absorbing their experiences and memories in the process, he made a show of mild exhaustion. Better they believe these abilities taxed him as significantly than know his true stamina and reserves. "I know you're watching," he called out casually, addressing the empty air. "If you have questions, you might as well ask them directly next time. I don't bite." With that parting statement, he gathered his equipment and headed back toward the city proper, leaving his observers to digest what they'd witnessed and report to their respective masters. Fascinating, Freya murmured, stroking the white feathers of her personal messenger hawk as Alan Frommel delivered his report in her private chamber atop Babel Tower. Creating solid duplicates without a spell chant, manipulating energy in visible form, walking on vertical surfaces, abilities no adventurer possesses without years of development and an advanced fauna. His movements suggest formal combat training, Alan added, kneeling before his goddess. Different from any fighting style in Orario, but highly effective. He was holding back during the demonstration, though I cannot say by how much. Of course he was. Freya smiled, releasing the hawk to its perch. He knows he's being watched. He's intelligent, then, not just powerful. Tell me, Alan, what color would you say his soul is? The cat person blinked at the unexpected question. I wouldn't presume to see what only you can perceive, Lady Freya. Indulge me with a guess. Alan considered for a moment. Based on his movements and decisions. Perhaps blue, like clear water. Or gold. Freya laughed softly. Neither. It burns red. Not the red of blood or violence, but the red of absolute vitality, like a hearth fire that cannot be extinguished. Yet it's partially veiled by something ancient and powerful that coils around his essence, something with its own distinct presence. Alan's ears flattened slightly in alarm. 2 souls in one body. Is that possible? Not precisely 2 souls. More like symbiosis. Freya moved to her window, gazing out at Orario spread below. Find out more about his activities, his contacts, his habits. I want to understand him completely before making my approach. As you wish, my goddess. Alan rose smoothly. What of Loki's people? They're watching him as well. Freya's perfect features hardened momentarily. Let them watch. Loki plays these games without understanding the true value of what she seeks. This one. She paused, her kaleidoscopic eyes distant. This one is different from any mortal I've encountered in millennia. After Alan departed, Freya returned to her silver mirror, summoning an image of Naruto as he walked through Io's streets toward his guild-provided apartment. Something about his solitude amid the bustling city touched an unexpected chord within her, a sensation she hadn't experienced since descending from the divine realm. Who are you really? Naruto Uzumaki, she whispered to his reflection. And what made you burn so brightly that even your sorrows cannot diminish your light? Sunset painted aura, Rio's western wall in brilliant gold as Naruto stood atop his apartment building, watching adventurers return from the dungeon in weary groups. 3 days had passed since his training ground demonstration, and as expected, the surveillance had intensified rather than diminished. He'd identified at least 7 different observers rotating shifts, representing what Ryu had later confirmed were 3 distinct familias, Freya, Loki, and Hermes. Quite the audience you've attracted, came a melodic voice from behind him. Naruto turned, unsurprised to find Ryu had approached without triggering his perimeter awareness, a feat few in this world could manage. She wore her tavern uniform, suggesting she was headed to work at the Hostess of Fertility. Seems that way, he agreed. Though I expected it after our conversation. Ryu moved to stand beside him at the rooftop's edge. The guild has assigned you your first mission. Aina Tool was looking for you earlier. Oh, how did you know that before I did? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The hostess is where information flows as freely as wine. Guild advisor Misha mentioned it to a regular patron. I'll check in with them tomorrow morning, then. Naruto gazed westward, where the dungeon tower rose against the darkening sky. Have you heard what kind of mission? Escort duty. The guild is sending researchers to examine ruins discovered in the northern forest. Apparently, strange energy readings similar to dungeon phenomena have been detected there. Naruto's interest sharpened. Similar to when I arrived. Ryu's eyes widened slightly. You appeared through a dimensional disturbance. Something like that. Naruto hadn't shared the details of his arrival with anyone yet, but something about Ryu's straightforward nature encouraged honesty. There was a rift between places. I fell through it. That explains much about your unique situation. She studied him with new understanding. The guild may have connected your arrival with these ruins. If so, this mission is as much about observing you as protecting their researchers. I figured as much, Naruto admitted. But if there's a connection to how I got here, it's worth investigating anyway. They stood in companionable silence for several moments before Ryu spoke again. You should know that Yamato Makoto of Loki Familia has been asking questions about you at the hostess. She seems particularly interested in your fighting techniques, claiming they resemble lost arts from her homeland in the Far East. Is that a common origin here? Uncommon enough to be noteworthy. The Far East exists across the ocean, but few make the journey to Orario. Their combat traditions differ significantly from those developed around the dungeon. Naruto processed this information, so this Makoto might approach me claiming cultural kinship. Most likely, she seems genuine in her interest, but remember that Loki rarely acts without multiple motives. Ryu adjusted her collar. I should go. My shift begins soon. I appreciate the information, Naruto said sincerely. It helps to have someone watching my back in this place. Something flicker. In Ryu's expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. We all needed allies when we first came to Orario. Some of us forgot that lesson along the way. Before he could respond to the weighted statement, she had vanished over the rooftop's edge with the silent efficiency he was coming to associate with her. Naruto remained, watching stars appear above Orario's skyline as he considered his situation. This mission could be useful, Kurama observed within his mind. If there are traces of dimensional energy similar to our arrival, it might offer clues about this world's connection to others. Or whether anyone else made it through from our world, Naruto added, the thought both hopeful and painful. He'd seen no evidence that any other shinobi had survived their world's collapse. But until he understood the mechanism that had brought him here, he couldn't completely abandon hope. As night fully claimed the city, lanterns and magic stones illuminated the streets below, creating pools of light amid the growing darkness. Orario continued its eternal rhythm, adventurers celebrating or mourning the day's dungeon crawl, merchants closing shops, guards changing shifts along the walls. Life continuing, unaware of other worlds and their fates. Naruto finally descended to his sparse apartment, preparing for tomorrow's mission with methodical efficiency. Equipment check, weapons inventory, meditation to center his chakra. The familiar routine brought comfort amid the strangeness of his circumstances. As he finally lay down to rest, his thoughts drifted to the Ds who watched him from their towers and temples, playing their immortal games with mortal lives. In his former world, he had faced and defeated beings who claimed divinity through power alone. Here, the dynamic seemed more complex, gods who had voluntarily limited their powers to experience mortal existence, yet retained their divine perspective and immortal patience. Different game, same players, Kurama rumbled sleepily. Gods and their playthings. Maybe, Naruto conceded, but this time, we're not playing by their rules. With that defiant thought, he allowed sleep to claim him. Unaware that his first official mission would bring him face to face with echoes of the world he'd lost in the beginning of his legend in this new one. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, The Gods, Interest. Dawn broke over Orario, painting the white tower of Babel in hues of amber and gold. Naruto stood before the guild headquarters, mentally preparing for his first official mission. The familiar, Weight of his equipment pouches offered a small comfort amid this still strange world. He'd spent the early hours in meditation, aligning his chakra with the peculiar natural energy of this realm, a practice that grew marginally easier each day. "You're early," Aina Tool observed as she approached from the street, her half-elven features composed despite the hour. Most adventurers require some encouragement for morning departures. Quote, "Old habits," Naruto replied with a slight shrug. "In my experience, preparation time before a mission is never wasted." Aina studied him with professional assessment. "That mindset explains why you've acclimated to Orario more quickly than most outsiders." She gestured toward the guild entrance. "The research team is completing their preparations. I'll brief you while they finish." The guild's interior remained quiet, most adventurers still sleeping off the previous night's revelry or dungeon exhaustion. Aina led him to a private consultation room W. Here maps and documents covered a large table. "Your assignment," she began without preamble, "involves escorting 3 guild researchers to recently discovered ruins approximately 15 kilometers north of Orario. These ruins emerged 3 weeks ago after a localized earthquake." "Emerged?" Naruto queried, examining the detailed topographical map she indicated. "Yes. According to local farmers, the ground literally shifted to reveal structures that hadn't been there previously." Aina's finger traced a route through forested regions. Initial surveys detected energy signatures similar to those emanating from the dungeon, but with certain anomalies. "What kind of anomalies?" Aina's professional demeanor wavered slightly. "Temporal inconsistencies, objects appearing and disappearing, unusual weather patterns confined to the immediate vicinity." She hesitated before adding, "and energy readings that bear similarities to those briefly detected when you arrived in Orario." Naruto's attention sharpened. "I see. So this mission serves multiple purposes. The guild believes your unique abilities may provide insights into the ruins, nature," Aina acknowledged. "However, protection of our researchers remains the primary objective. The area has attracted monster activity since its appearance, primarily land-based predators, but occasionally more unusual specimens." "How long will we remain at the site?" 3 days. The researchers will catalog findings, collect samples, and attempt to access the main chamber, which has thus far resisted conventional entry methods. Aina handed him a sealed scroll. "This contains your official authorization and specific instructions. The guild expects daily reports via messaging crystals." Naruto accepted the scroll, tucking it into his equipment pouch. "Any restrictions I should be aware of?" "Use whatever means necessary to ensure the team's safety." Aina's expression remained neutral, but her eyes conveyed additional meaning. "The guild is particularly interested in how your abilities interact with the ruins' energy. Detailed observations would be appreciated." The underlying message was clear. This mission would saint his capabilities as much as protect the researchers. "Understood." A knock interrupted their conversation as a guild staff member announced the research team's readiness. Aina escorted Naruto to T building's rear courtyard where 3 individuals waited beside a loaded cart. "Naruto Uzumaki, your security detail," Aina introduced him. "These are Thorn Harwick, our chief archaeologist, Lenora Martel, magical energy specialist, and Finn Brody, geographical surveyor." Thorn, a barrel-chested human with a salt and pepper beard, gave Naruto a skeptical once-over. "This is our protection." "One man. I requested a team from Ganesha Familia. Mr. Uzumaki possesses specialized skills uniquely suited to this expedition," Aina replied smoothly. "I assure you, he's more than capable." Lenora, a petite woman with owlish glasses and an intricate staff strapped to her back, studied Naruto with open curiosity. "You're the independent contractor everyone's been whispering about. The one who uses magic without a falna. Word travels fast in this city," Naruto observed, not for the first time. "Small professional circles," the third researcher, Finn, remarked. The youthful human stood taller than his companions, with cartographer's tools and what appeared to be measurement devices hanging from his belt. "Especially when someone breaks established magical theory." Naruto offered a noncommittal shrug. "Shall we get moving? I'd prefer to make significant progress before midday." Despite Thorn's continued skepticism, the group departed through Orario's northern gate as morning traffic began filling the streets. Naruto positioned himself at the front of their small caravan, maintaining a steady pace while extending his senses to scan their surroundings. 3 different observers tracked their departure. Alan from Freya Familia, someone from Loki's group, and a third he couldn't identify. They're not even trying to hide their interest anymore, Kurama noted within Naruto's mind. Let them watch. This mission might help us understand how we got here, and whether there's any way back. The fox's response carried uncharacteristic gentleness. Back to what, Kit? You saw what happened to our world. Naruto had no answer to that painful truth. In the opulent gardens of her mansion, Freya reclined on a cushioned divan as Ottar delivered his morning report. The massive Boaz stood at rigid attention, his deep voice methodically detailing overnight developments among Orario's familias. And Alan confirms that Uzumaki departed this morning with Guild researchers bound for the northern ruins, he concluded. The temporal anomaly site, interesting. Freya twirled a strand of silver hair, her kaleidoscopic eyes distant with contemplation. The Guild moves quickly to test his capabilities. They've assigned him escort duty, but the research team includes Lenora Martel, their foremost expert in magical energy transference. Of course. Freya's perfect lips curved in amusement. They wish to understand how he channels power without a Falna. So predictable, these mortals with their scientific curiosity. Ottar remained silent, awaiting further instructions. Have Heath shadow them at a distance, Freya decided after a moment. I want regular reports, but no interference unless absolutely necessary. This expedition may reveal aspects of our mysterious visitor that controlled demonstrations cannot. As you command. Ottar bowed deeply. One more thing. Freya's expression shifted to something more contemplative. I've invited Errol Familia leaders to a gathering tomorrow evening. Ensure preparations meet our standard of perfection. A social function at this time is unexpected, Lady Freya. A secretive smile played across her features. The best moves in any game appear unexpected to observers, my faithful Ottar. While our golden-haired friend explores ruins, I shall explore the political landscape surrounding him. She rose gracefully, moving to gaze out across her expansive gardens. After all, information flows most freely when wine and flattery loosen tongues. As Ottar departed to execute her commands, Rhea allowed her thoughts to drift toward the ruined temple to the north. The temporal disturbances reported there resonated with ancient memories from before her descent to the mortal realm. Echoes of cosmic powers that predated even the gods themselves. That such phenomena coincided with Naruto's arrival seemed far beyond mere coincidence. What secrets do you carry, my interesting mortal? She murmured. And what forces have you set in motion simply by existing in our world? The forests north of Orario grew increasingly dense as Naruto's group progressed throughout the morning. Massy trees with trunks wider than houses dominated the landscape, their canopies creating a perpetual emerald twilight on the forest floor. The cart's wheels occasionally struggled against exposed roots and uneven terrain, requiring collective effort to navigate particularly challenging stretches. By midday, Naruto had dispatched 3 monster encounters with efficient precision, a pack of needle rabbits, 2 wandering killer ants, and a solitary orc that had strayed far from its usual territory. He deliberately used only taijutsu and basic weapons, saving his more distinctive abilities unless genuinely needed. Remarkable efficiency, Lenora commented after he dispatched the orc with a precisely aimed kunai to its throat. Your fighting style doesn't resemble any school I've encountered in Orario. As I understand it, most fighters here develop techniques based on dungeon experience, Naruto replied while retrieving his weapon. Where I'm from, combat training follows different traditions. And where exactly is that? Thorn inquired, his earlier skepticism gradually giving way to professional curiosity. Naruto cleaned his blade methodically. Somewhere you wouldn't find on any map available in Orario. Before further questions could follow, he held up a hand for silence. His enhanced senses had detected movement approximately 200 meters ahead, too deliberate to be wildlife. Too heavy to be standard forest predators. We're not alone, he warned quietly. Multiple entities ahead, attempting concealment. The researchers exchanged concerned glances as Finn whispered, monsters. No. Naruto shook his head. Human or demi-human, armed, waiting in ambush formation. Thorn reached for a short sword at his belt. Bandits. this far from established routes. Wait here, Naruto instructed. Forming a familiar hand sign. Shadow clone jutsu. Two perfect duplicates appeared beside him in puffs of smoke, earning gasps from the researchers despite their prior briefing about his abilities. Without verbal communication, the clones circled wide to flank the ambush position while Naruto addressed the startled team. My duplicates will gather intelligence. We'll proceed cautiously in the meantime. He gestured toward the cart. Keep weapons accessible but not drawn. Sometimes the appearance of preparedness prevents conflict. They continued forward at reduced speed. Naruto extending his senses fully while maintaining a relaxed outward appearance. Through his clones' shared perception, he identified their watchers, 6 individuals in light armor bearing no familia insignia. Armed with short bows and hunting spears. Their positioning suggested experience with coordinated attacks, though their equipment lacked the quality typical of established adventurers. When the cart rounded a bend in the path, bringing them within optimal ambush range, Naruto raised his hand casually and spoke in a conversational tone. I know you're there. 6 of you, armed. Positioned in standard pincer formation. We're on official guild business and have no quarrel with you. Show yourselves peacefully, and we can both continue our separate ways. Tense silence foe. Load his announcement until a low chuckle emerged from the undergrowth. A slender human woman with close-cropped silver hair rose from concealment, a shortbow held non-threateningly at her side. Sharp senses for a city dweller, she remarked, signaling her companions to reveal themselves. Most travelers don't spot us until we want to be spotted. We're not most travelers, Naruto replied evenly, noting through his clones that the other ambushers maintained tactical positions despite their apparent casualness. Guild researchers with proper authorization to investigate the ruins that appeared after the earthquake. I'm their escort. The woman's eyes narrowed at the mention of the ruins. Those cursed stones. You'd be wise to turn back. Nothing good comes from places that appear from nowhere. You've observed the ruins. Lenora stepped forward eagerly despite Naruto's cautioning glance. From a distance, only fools venture closer. The woman spit on the ground emphatically. Three of our hunters disappeared investigating. The only one who returned babbled nonsense about time flowing backward and shadows that moved on their own. Died of fever the next day. Thorn and Leno. Ra exchanged significant looks as Finn hurriedly noted these details in a small journal. Naruto maintained his focus on the armed group, detecting no immediate hostility but remaining alert to their positions through his hidden clones. We appreciate the warning, he said diplomatically. The guild seeks to understand these phenomena to prevent further harm. If there are specific areas you found particularly dangerous, any information would be valuable. The woman studied him with weathered eyes that had clearly witnessed their share of hardship. You're different from the usual guild representatives. Less soft, more. She seemed to search for the right word, aware. I've encountered strange phenomena before, Naruto offered truthfully. After a measured silence, she gestured to one of her companions who produced a crude but effective map drawn on cured hide. The disturbances are strongest here, and here, she indicated, pointing to 3 locations around the main ruins. Animals avoid these areas entirely. Plants grow and die within hours. Sometimes rain falls upward. Finn copied the locations onto his own map as Lenora asked, have you observed any patterns to the phenomena? Times of day when effects intensify or diminish. Stronger at twilight and dawn. Weaker at high noon. The woman's expression darkened. And strongest when the red moon rises. Which happens tonight, Outlander. If you have any sense, you'll make camp far from those cursed stones before sunset. Naruto committed these details to memory while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. We'll consider your advice carefully. May we know who we're thanking for this information. Riza, former adventurer, current protector of the forest settlements. She gestured to her companions. We patrol these woods against monsters and bandits since the guild rarely extends protection beyond city walls. A worthy purpose, Naruto acknowledged with genuine respect. Something in his tone must have resonated with the woman, for her posture relaxed marginally. There's a clearing 3 kilometers east of here. Defensible position, clean water source. Would make a suitable camp before you approach the ruins tomorrow. Thank you, Riza. With a final assessing look, she signaled her group, and they melted back into the forest with practiced efficiency. Naruto maintained his clones. Surveillance until he confirmed their genuine departure before addressing the research team. Their concerns seemed authentic, he observed. The warnings about temporal phenomena align with guild reports. Lenora nodded eagerly, and the mention of the red moon corresponds with our measurement spikes. Thorn, this supports your theory about lunar influence on the dimensional stability. Old consider making camp at the location she suggested, Naruto advised, glancing at the sky visible through gaps in the canopy. That gives us time to establish proper defenses before nightfall. Thorn stroked his beard thoughtfully. Part of me wants to push directly to the ruins, but I respect local knowledge. If these forest protectors fear the sight at night, we'd be fools to dismiss their caution. With general agreement, they adjusted their course eastward. As they traveled, Naruto dispatched one clone to scout the suggested campsite while keeping the other ranging ahead of their position. Through the clone's shared perception, he confirmed the clearing indeed offered tactical advantages: elevated ground, clear sightlines, and a defensible perimeter. Your duplicates, Finn remarked as they walked. They're not illusions, are they? They interact physically with the environment. Shadow clones, Naruto explained, deciding some information would satisfy curiosity while preventing more probing questions. They're solid duplicates that share consciousness with the original. When they disperse, their experiences return to me. Fascinating. Such techniques would revolutionize survey work. The young cartographer's eyes practically shone with excitement. No chanting, no magical circles, just instant duplication with shared awareness. It requires significant energy and specific training, Naruto cautioned, deliberately understating his clone capacity. Most practitioners in my homeland could maintain only one or two simultaneously for brief periods. Yet you sustain multiple clones over extended distances without apparent strain, Lenora observed shrewdly, suggesting either extraordinary capacity or exceptional efficiency. Naruto offered a noncommittal shrug, redirecting the conversation toward their mission parameters. Inwardly, he noted the researcher's perceptiveness, particularly Lenora, whose assessment of magical phenomena likely made her valuable to the guild's investigation of his abilities. They're testing you while you test the ruins, Kurama commented. Clever arrangement. Expected, though. Better to provide controlled information than leave them guessing. By late afternoon, they reached the clearing Riza had recommended. True to her description, the location offered natural advantages, a slight elevation with clear views of approaching paths, proximity to a small stream, and enough open space to establish proper perimeter awareness. I'll secure the area, Naruto announced as the researchers began unloading essential equipment. My clones will establish a surveillance perimeter while I identify defensive positions. Working with practiced efficiency, he deployed 6 shadow clones in a wide circle around the clearing, each concealed at strategic vantage points. With the security framework established, he assisted in camp preparation, applying shinobi field protocols adapted to this world's unique threats. As twilight approached, the forest atmosphere subtly shifted. Wind patterns changed direction without warning. Distant sounds carried with unnatural clarity before abruptly fading. Most noticeably, patches of vegetation cycled through seasonal changes, spring blooms giving way to summer fullness, autumn withering, and winter dormancy within spans of minutes. The temporal distortions are increasing with sunset, Lenora observed, adjusting crystal-embedded instruments that emitted soft pulses of colored light. Precisely as our forest friends warned. Look there, Finn pointed skyward. Here the first stars had become visible through breaks in the canopy. Among them, a faint crimson disk had begun rising, the red moon Riza had mentioned. The researchers busied themselves with observa-tions and measurements while Naruto maintained vigilant awareness of their surroundings. Through his clone network, he detected unusual chakra fluctuations throughout the forest, patterns reminiscent of space-time ninjutsu but wilder, less controlled. The natural energy felt increasingly unstable, resembling the chaotic flows he'd experienced during dimensional transitions. Thorn, Lenora called suddenly, her instruments flaring with brilliant light. The readings just tripled in intensity. At that precise moment, Naruto felt a distinctive popping sensation as 3 of his distant clones dispersed simultaneously. Their final perceptions flooded his consciousness, images of reality literally rippling, trees aging decades in seconds, and brief, disorienting glimpses of landscapes that didn't belong to this forest. "We have a situation," he announced calmly, immediately forming new clones to replace those lost. "Temporal disturbances just destabilized 3 sectors of our perimeter. I am getting similar reports from remaining surveillance positions. Already, but we're still kilometers from the ruins," Thorn exclaimed, abandoning his equipment to join Naruto at the clearing's edge. Naruto focused his senses, processing the information flowing from his remaining clones. The disturbances are moving, flowing like water across the landscape, following no obvious pattern. Mobile temporal waves, Lenora breathed, excitement overriding caution. "This confirms my thesis about dimensional bleed-through. Quick, Finn, help me calibrate the resonance tracker." As the researchers rushed to adjust their equipment, Naruto created 2 additional clones. "Maintain defensive positions here," he instructed them. "I'm going to investigate personally." Before Thorn could protest, Naruto had vanished into the darkening forest, moving with the silent efficiency that had been second nature since his genin days. He tracked the temporal disturbances through distortions in the natural energy field, approaching cautiously as the phenomena manifested visibly in the physical world. What he found exceeded even his expectations. Approximately 1 kilometer from their camp, reality itself seemed to thin. Patches of forest flickering between seasons, animals appearing and disappearing like faulty projections, and most significantly, occasional transparent overlays of entirely different landscapes. Through one such distortion, Naruto glimpsed what appeared to be a desert plateau beneath twin suns, visible for seconds before being replaced by the normal forest. "Dimensional fractures," Kurama observed with unusual seriousness. "Similar to what began appearing in our world before the end. But smaller scale, more contained," Naruto noted, approaching the nearest distortion with cautious steps. "These aren't tearing reality apart, at least not yet. No, but they're weakening the boundaries between dimensions. Creating windows, perhaps even temporary passages." That possibility ignited hope and dread in equal measure. Naruto extended his hand toward the nearest ripple, feeling resistance like pushing against elastic fabric. The air hummed with energy. Why reminiscent of Sasuke's space-time techniques, yet wilder, less directed. A sudden surge in the distortion's intensity forced him to leap backward as the affected area expanded dramatically. Within the enlarged window, the desert landscape reappeared with greater clarity, and with it, a massive structure that sent shock waves through Naruto's system. That architecture, Kurama's mental voice reflected Naruto's own stunned recognition. The distinctive curved style, the specific arrangement of symbols along towering columns, unmistakably reminiscent of Uzushiogakure ruins. Not identical, but sharing design principles that couldn't be coincidental. Before Naruto could process this discovery, the distortion collapsed with a sound like shattering glass, leaving normal forest in its wake. Only the accelerated growth of nearby vegetation, trees visibly adding rings, undergrowth sprouting and flowering in minutes, evidenced the temporal disruption that had occurred. Naruto stood motionless, mind racing with implications. Architecture resembling his mother's destroyed homeland, appearing through dimensional rifts connected to the ruins they sought to investigate. The possibility that these phenomena might connect to his own world, or some variant of it, suddenly seemed less theoretical and more tangibly real. A distant cry from the direction of their camp snapped him from his contemplation. Without hesitation, he channeled chakra to his legs and raced back, covering the kilometer in seconds. He arrived to find the clearing in chaos. Swirling temporal distortions had reached their position, creating havoc among the research equipment as reality fluctuated unpredictably. More alarmingly, these disturbances had attracted monsters, not ordinary forest predators, but creatures that shouldn't exist outside the dungeon. A juvenile minotaur bellowed in confusion as patches of accelerated time caused its horns to grow and recede repeatedly. 3 hellhounds circled the researchers, who had taken refuge atop their supply wagon as Naruto's clones maintained a defensive perimeter. "The disturbances are pulling monsters through spatial weak points," Lenora shouted upon seeing him. "They're being displaced from the dungeon somehow." Naruto assessed the situation in an instant. His clones were managing containment, but the hellhounds' fire breath presented a significant threat to both equipment and personnel. The Minotaur, though disoriented, remained dangerously powerful and increasingly agitated by the temporal fluctuations affecting its body. "Stay together and maintain your position," he commanded. Forming a cross-shaped hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 clones materialized around the clearing, immediately engaging the hellhounds with coordinated taijutsu. Naruto himself faced the Minotaur, which had finally noticed him and lowered its horns in challenge. "I need these monsters alive for study," Lenora called, earning incredulous looks from her colleagues. "Alive but contained." "Understood." Naruto nodded to his clones, who adjusted their approach accordingly. The Minotaur charged, surprisingly fast despite its bulk. Naruto sidestepped with practiced ease, striking precise pressure points along the creature's flank as it passed. The beast roared in confusion as its right leg suddenly lost function, causing it to crash spectacularly into a fallen log. Meanwhile, his clones had corralled the hellhounds, using transformation techniques to confuse the creatures by appearing as identical targets. When the monsters grouped together in confusion, 3 clones executed a perfect synchronized water jutsu, a moderate-level technique that created a swirling prison of liquid around the fire-breathing creatures. "Water style. Fluid encapsulation technique," Naruto announced for the researchers' benefit, maintaining the watery prison with steady chakra flow. The hellhounds thrashed within their liquid cage, flames extinguished by the surrounding water. The Minotaur had regained its footing but now faced 5 identical Narutos approaching from different angles. Bellowing in frustration, it lashed out randomly, only to find its limb system adequately disabled by precise strikes to nerve clusters and muscle groups. Within moments, the creature collapsed, paralyzed but conscious. "Remarkable," Thorn breathed as he cautiously descended from the wagon. "Targeted paralysis rather than lethal force." "Pressure point manipulation," Naruto explained, maintaining focus on both incapacitated monster groups. "The effects are temporary, but old last long enough for your observations." Lenora wasted no time, directing Finn to help her deploy specialized equipment around both monster groups. Crystal-embedded instruments recorded magical signatures while she sketched rapid notes about their physical condition. "These hellhounds show biological markers from the 10th floor, but the Minotaur's development suggests 12th floor origin," she muttered excitedly. Spatial displacement across multiple dungeon strata simultaneously. While the researchers conducted their analysis, Naruto extended his senses beyond their immediate area. The temporal disturbances had begun to stabilize, receding toward the direction of the main ruins. The red moon had fully risen now, bathing the forest in crimson light that lent an otherworldly quality to the scene. "We should consider relocating," he suggested once Lenora had collected sufficient data. "These spatial weak points might attract more dungeon creatures, potentially from deeper floors." "Agreed," Thorn nodded, his initial skepticism completely abandoned. "Though I'm curious how you plan to handle our current visitors once we depart." Naruto considered the options. "My water Raizen will dissolve when we're safely distant, releasing the hellhounds. The Minotaur's paralysis will wear off gradually over several hours, by which time the spatial distortions should have receded. Enough to potentially return them to their origin points." "Fascinating hypothesis," Lenora commented, adjusting her glasses. "You believe the temporal rifts might naturally revert displaced entities?" "It's consistent with similar phenomena I've encountered," Naruto replied carefully, not elaborating on when or where such encounters had occurred. They quickly packed essential equipment, leaving the heavier instruments secured beneath weatherproof coverings. With Naruto and his remaining clones forming a protective formation around the researchers, they departed the clearing, heading toward higher ground where temporal effects appeared less pronounced. As they traveled, Finn approached Naruto with obvious curiosity. "Your combat techniques, they combine elements of magic with physical disciplines in ways of never observed in adventurers. Is this common methodology where you're from?" "Standard training," Naruto confirmed. "We integrate physical combat, tactical deception, and RGY manipulation as complementary aspects rather than separate disciplines." Without a Falna or spirit blessing to facilitate magical channeling, Lenora added from nearby, clearly having followed their conversation. "The implications for magical theory are revolutionary." Naruto maintained polite engagement while carefully limiting technical details. Though these researchers seemed genuinely focused on scientific understanding rather than exploitation, he remained mindful of how such information might be utilized by others in Orario. They established a secondary camp on elevated terrain approximately 2 kilometers from their original position. The higher ground offered improved visibility while exhibiting minimal temporal fluctuations. Naruto deployed fresh clones to establish chair security while the researchers set up reduced monitoring equipment. Based on observed patterns, the disturbances should diminish significantly by midnight, Thorne theorized, consulting Lenora's measurements. We can approach the main ruins shortly after dawn, when phenomena are supposedly at their minimum intensity. A sound strategy, Naruto agreed, accepting a cup of tea from Finn. Though, I recommend maintaining elevated awareness throughout the night. These manifestations appear somewhat unpredictable. As the researchers settled into rotation for observation and rest, Naruto positioned himself at the camp's edge, entering a meditative state that allowed him to maintain situational awareness while processing the day's discoveries. The glimpsed architecture weighed heavily on his mind, its Uzushiogakure-like characteristics suggesting connections he hadn't anticipated. It might not be your Uzushiogakure, Kurama cautioned. Dimensional parallels often feature AR developments with critical differences. I know, but it's the first potential link to our world I've encountered since arriving. The fox remained thoughtfully silent for several moments. The dimensional thinning works both ways, Kit. Whatever can come through might also provide passage out, or to other dimensions entirely. Including somewhere worse than here, Naruto acknowledged grimly, remembering Kagaya's dimension-hopping abilities and the devastation they had witnessed. The night passed with relative calm, punctuated only by distant flashes of temporal disturbances and the occasional disorienting sensation when natural energy patterns shifted unpredictably. True to Thorne's prediction, the phenomena gradually diminished in intensity as midnight passed, though the red moon remained visible throughout the night, like a watchful eye observing their expedition. Dawn arrived with mist that clung to the forest floor, shrouding the landscape in ethereal white. Naruto rose from his meditative position, senses immediately cataloging their surroundings. The researchers had maintained their observation rotations diligently, producing substantial documentation of overnight phenomena patterns. The disturbances follow approximately 23-minute cycles, Lenora reported over breakfast, spreading charts before them. Intensity peaks correlate perfectly with the red moon's zenith position. If these patterns hold, we have an optimal approach window beginning 30 minutes from now. My clones report the path to the ruins appears relatively stable, Naruto confirmed. Though reality still thins in certain locations. They departed camp with methodical efficiency, leaving behind non-essential equipment with a pair of Naruto's clones standing guard. The journey toward the ruins took them through increasingly affected terrain, patches of forest that appeared centuries older than surrounding areas, clearings where plants grew visibly before their eyes, and occasional glimpses of foreign landscapes through transparent rifts in reality. When they finally crested a ridge overlooking their destination, the researchers fell silent with collective awe. The ruins sprawled across a shallow valley, white stone gleaming in morning light despite evident age and weathering. Their architectural style defied easy categorization, curved elements innocent of Uzushiogakure interspersed with angular components unlike anything Naruto had seen before. Most striking was the central structure, a domed building surrounded by concentric circles of pillars, each carved with spiraling patterns that seemed to capture and reflect light in hypnotic patterns. "It's beautiful," Finn whispered reverently. "Like nothing documented in any archaeological record. The energy readings are off any established scale," Lenora added, her instruments flaring with colorful lights. "Definitely dungeon-adjacent magic, but with harmonic frequencies I've never encountered." Thorne adjusted his equipment pack with professional determination. "Let's proceed carefully. Standard archaeological protocols apply. Document everything, touch nothing without proper assessment. Maintain minimum safe distances from any active phenomena." As they descended toward the ruins, Naruto created additional clones to secure their approach path and establish a surveillance perimeter. Something about the sight triggered deep recognition within him. Not specific familiarity, but a sensation of conceptual rightness, as though these structures somehow resonated with his own nature. "The patterns," Kurama observed. "They're seal-work foundations." Naruto studied the spiraling engravings with renewed attention, recognizing elements that indeed resembled Fuinjutsu principles he'd learned from Jiraiya. Not identical to Uzushiogakure techniques, but clearly operating on related conceptual frameworks. These inscriptions, he commented, approaching one fallen column. While the researchers documented the site's layout, they appear to be functional rather than merely decorative. Lenora joined him, adjusting her glasses as she examined the spiraling patterns. You recognize this writing system? Not precisely, Naruto replied carefully. But the structural organization suggests a systematic language designed to channel energy rather than simply record information. Magical formula script, she agreed, producing a small notebook. Though unlike any catalog tradition, the closest analogues might be certain Far Eastern sealing methodologies, but even T.Hos lack this distinct spiral patterning. They proceeded deeper into the ruins, documenting increasingly complex inscriptions as they approached the central dome structure. Temporal disturbances manifested more frequently here. Localized areas where water droplets fell upward, shadows moved independently of their casters, and occasionally, objects phased partially out of existence before reappearing moments later. The dome itself remained remarkably intact despite its apparent age. No obvious entrance presented itself until Thorn discovered a seam running vertically along one section, suggesting a doorway sealed with such precision that nearly no gap remained visible. No conventional mechanism, the archaeologist muttered, examining the seam carefully. No hinges, no handle depressions, no keyhole. Because it's not meant to be opened mechanically, Naruto observed, studying the intricate patterns surrounding the seam. These markings suggest energetic activation rather than physical manipulation. A magical lock, Finn suggested. More like. Naruto searched for terminology that would translate across cultural frameworks. A resonance gate, designed to respond to specific energy signatures. Lenora immediately began adjusting her instruments, attempting to measure the doorway's magical properties. Meanwhile, Naruto circled the structure, examining the spiraling inscriptions with increasing certainty of their purpose. This is definitely seal work, he communicated to Kurama. Advanced dimensional formula components similar to what Jiraiya-sensei showed me from Uzushiogakure archives. With significant differences, the fox cautioned. The base principles appear similar, but the implementation follows different rules. Their investigation continued throughout the morning as the researchers documented every accessible aspect of the ruins. Naruto maintained vigilant security through his clone network while assisting with interpretation of the energy patterns. By midday, they had compiled extensive observations but made little progress accessing the central chamber. The doorway definitely responds to magical energy, Lenora reported during their brief meal break. But not to any standard activation method. I've tried elemental attunement, harmonic resonance, even blood offering protocols used in ancient barrier systems. P.S. It requires a specific key we haven't identified, Thorn suggested. Many ancient civilizations created focal objects designed to interact with their sealed structures. Naruto considered the spiraling patterns with growing certainty about their function. It might respond to a specific energy signature rather than a physical key. In Fuinjutsu, he caught himself using the term, quickly adjusting. In certain sealing traditions I'm familiar with, locks can be keyed to individual energy patterns. Like a fauna-linked barrier? Finn asked, referring to magical systems that responded only to members of specific familias. Similar in principle, though likely predating your god-based systems, Naruto replied. He approached the sealed doorway, studying the innermost spiral pattern that encircled the seam. This central design appears to be a resonance formula, meant to harmonize with compatible energy and temporarily weaken the dimensional barrier. You sound remarkably familiar with these principles for someone claiming only passing knowledge, Lenora observed shrewdly. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Let's just say I've encountered similar conceptual frameworks during my travels. Before further discussion could develop, one of his distant clones dispersed, sending alarming information flooding into his consciousness. We have company, he announced, immediately creating fresh clones to reinforce their perimeter. Multiple entities approaching from the northeast, not monsters, but armed individuals moving with purpose toward our position. Thorn tensed visibly. Bandits. This far into anomaly territory? Quote, no, Naruto replied grimly. Based on their equipment and formation, they're trained adventurers. 15 individuals minimum, traveling in coordinated units. Definitely not random opportunists. Which familia? Finn asked, hastily gathering his equipment. No visible insignia, but their equipment quality suggests significant resources. Naruto turned to the researchers. You should withdraw to our secondary camp position while I handle this. Absolutely not, Thorn objected firmly. This expedition has guild authorization. No familia has jurisdiction to interfere with official research activities. I doubt jurisdiction is their primary concern, Naruto countered, receiving another memory burst as a second clone dispersed. They've disabled 2 of my perimeter guards already. These are high-level adventurers using stealth approach tactics. Lenora's expression hardened with unexpected determination. The guild anticipated potential interference. That's why they assigned you specifically, isn't it? Among other reasons, Naruto acknowledged. But my priority remains your safety. And our priority is this research, she replied firmly. We need approximately 2 hours to complete essential documentation. Can you provide that time? Naruto assessed the situation rapidly. 15 trained adventurers presented a serious challenge, but not insurmountable with strategic application of his abilities. More concerning was protecting the researchers while simultaneously engaging multiple high-level opponents. 2 hours, he agreed after brief consideration. But you'll follow my security instructions precisely, and be prepared to evacuate immediately if the situation deteriorates. With their agreement, Naruto quickly organized defensive preparations. He positioned the researchers within the most stable section of the ruins, surrounded by natural stone formations that provided both cover and limited access points. 6. Shadow clones established a layered defensive perimeter while Naruto himself prepared to intercept the approaching force before they reached the central ruins. I'll engage them at distance and attempt diplomatic resolution, he explained, checking his equipment. If that fails, I'll create sufficient distraction to buy your documentation time. My clones will maintain constant contact. If they signal evacuation, head immediately toward our secondary camp. No debates, no delays. The researchers nodded solemnly, recognizing the seriousness of their situation. As Naruto prepared to depart, Lenora caught his arm briefly. Be careful, she said with unexpected concern. Whatever familia they represent, they're likely after information about these ruins rather than simple territory dispute. Information. And you, I'm aware, Naruto assured her with a confident half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. This isn't my first uncomfortable introduction. Moving with silent efficiency, he left the central ruins, positioning himself at a strategic interception point along the approaching group's likely path. Through his remaining surveillance clones, he tracked their movement, professional, disciplined. With magical support elements and forward scouts. Whoever had organized this expedition had committed significant resources and expected substantial opposition. Time to introduce ourselves properly, Naruto communicated to Kurama, who had remained watchful throughout the mission. Try diplomacy first, the fox suggested with unusual restraint. But be prepared for the gods and their followers to understand only demonstrations of power. Naruto nodded slightly, finding an elevated position atop a partially collapsed pillar that offered excellent visibility while maintaining tactical advantage. When the first scouts entered the clearing approximately 50 meters ahead, he made his presence known with deliberate openness. That's far enough, he called calmly, remaining relaxed but alert atop his perch. This area is currently under Guild Research Authority. State your purpose and familia affiliation. The scouts, a male cat person and female human, immediately assumed defensive positions. Weapons drawn as they assessed his solitary figure. Within moments, additional adventurers emerged from the forest edge, forming a loose semicircle facing his position. Their equipment quality confirmed his initial assessment: enhanced armor, specialized weapons, and magical items suggesting significant familiar resources. A tall elf woman with distinctive green hair stepped forward from their ranks. Her regal bearing and commanding presence immediately identifying her as their leader. Though she carried an ornate staff, her posture suggested complete confidence without requiring obvious defensive positioning. I am Riveriel Yo's Alf, executive of Loki Familia, she announced, her melodic voice carrying effortless authority. We're conducting an expedition to investigate temporal anomalies reported in this region. Quite a coincidence, Naruto replied evenly, considering guild researchers are already documenting those same anomalies under official authorization. With me as their assigned security. The guild's jurisdiction extends to established territories and standard phenomena, Rivria countered smoothly. These ruins and their associate dimensional instabilities potentially affect Orario's security, which places them within Loki Familia's sphere of legitimate interest. Diplomatic terminology barely concealing territorial assertio. A pattern Naruto recognized from political maneuvering in his former world. Your concern for Orario's welfare is admirable, but perhaps better coordinated through official channels rather than expeditions that bypass guild protocols. Several adventurers behind Rivria tensed at his implied criticism, but the elf herself remained perfectly composed. We attempted coordination. The guild declined our direct involvement. Yet here you are. Indeed. The barest hint of a smile touched her lips. Loki Familia takes certain security matters seriously enough to occasionally work outside conventional frameworks. As does your goddess, apparently. Naruto maintained his casual posture despite cataloging each adventurer's position and likely combat specialization. Though I notice she didn't accompany you personally. Goddesses rarely participate in field operations, Rivria replied. Particularly when investigating phenomena that might affect divine essence. Interesting admission, Naruto noted mentally. These temporal disturbances potentially impacted gods differently than mortals. Valuable information should diplomatic resolution fail. The researchers require approximately 2 more hours to complete essential documentation, he stated directly. After which we'll withdraw with our findings reported through proper channels. I suggest your expedition maintain observation distance until then to prevent unnecessary complications. Rivria studied him with ancient eyes that belied her youthful appearance. You're the independent contractor who works directly for the guild. The one who utilizes unique abilities without a falna. Word travels quickly in Orario, Naruto observed for perhaps the dozenth time since his arrival. Information is valuable currency, she agreed. Though first-hand observation typically proves more reliable than tavern gossip. The implication hung clearly between them. Loki Familia's interest extended beyond the ruins to Naruto himself. Their presence served dual purpose. Investigating the temporal anomalies while simultaneously assessing his capabilities in field conditions rather than controlled demonstrations. 2 hours, Naruto repeated firmly. After which you're welcome to examine the ruins while we return to Orario with our documentation. Everyone achieves their objectives without unnecessary conflict. Before Rivria could respond, a sharp crack echoed across the ruins as a temporal distortion manifested between their positions. Reality rippled visibly. The air shimmering like heat waves above desert sand as a rift began forming. Dimensional instability. One of the Loki adventurers called in warning, backing away rapidly. The distortion expanded with unusual speed, far exceeding the controlled fluctuations they'd observed previously. Within the growing rift, landscape fragments flickered rapidly, desert plateaus, icy tundra, dense jungle, urban structures, cycling in chaotic sequence as though multiple dimensions competed for manifestation. Naruto leapt from his position, landing between the researcher's location and the expanding rift. Fall back, he shouted to both groups. This pattern indicates major instability. Rivria immediately ordered her team to defensive positions while focusing magical energy through her staff. Fluctuation signature matches deep-level dungeon discharge, she called to her mages. Prepare containment protocols. Before either group could fully implement protective measures, the rift stabilized momentarily on a single-dimensional image, a blasted lands. Cape of shattered earth and twisted vegetation beneath a sky filled with unnatural lightning. More alarmingly, something moved within this window between worlds, a massive, serpentine form that appeared to notice the opening between dimensions. That's not a standard monster, Thorn shouted, having emerged from the central ruins despite Naruto's instructions. Energy signature suggests floor 20 equivalent or deeper. The creature surged toward the dimensional gateway with frightening intelligence, clearly recognizing an escape route from its devastated realm. Naruto assessed the situation in microseconds. If this entity breached their dimension, neither the researchers nor Loki's adventurers possessed sufficient combat capacity to contain it without catastrophic casualties. No choice, Kit, Kurama growled within his mind. Time to show a little more of what we can do. Naruto nodded grimly, forming familiar hand signs in rapid sequence. Everyone back. I'll handle this. To their credit, both Riveria and the researchers recognized the command presence in his voice, withdrawing their respective teams to safer distances. As the serpentine creature began pushing through the weakened dimensional boundary, Naruto focused his chakra, entering the initial stage of Sage Mode. Orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes as nature energy flowed through his chakra network, enhancing his physical attributes and sensory perception. The familiar weight of natural power settled into his system, though he noted again how this world's energy moved differently through his pathways, more reluctant, yet paradoxically more potent once properly aligned. What is he doing? Someone from Loki Familia whispered loudly enough for enhanced sage hearing to detect. Naruto ignored the distractions, focusing entirely on the dimensional breach and the creature now forcing its massive head through the opening. Its features became clearer, a serpent-like entity with multiple eyes, arranged in unsettling asymmetry along its skull, jaw unhinging to reveal rows of crystalline teeth that hummed with magical energy. Sage Art. Massive Rasengan. Naruto announced, forming a spiralan G-sphere of concentrated chakra nearly a meter in diameter between his hands. The researchers gasped audibly while Loki's adventurers murmured in collective shock. Even Riveria's composed expression faltered momentarily as she observed the massive energy concentration, far beyond what should be possible without divine blessing or years of developmental status growth. Naruto launched forward with sage-enhanced speed, crossing the distance to the dimensional rift in a blur of movement that left afterimages in his wake. The creature had managed to force its head and part of its upper body through the opening, multiple eyes focusing on potential prey with predatory intelligence. The massive Rasengan struck the creature's skull with catastrophic force, the spiraling energy drilling through OT. Her worldly scales and bone with relentless pressure. The monster shrieked, a sound that seemed to vibrate through multiple frequency ranges simultaneously, as Naruto drove it backward through the dimensional opening. Close the rift, he shouted to Riveria, recognizing her magical capacity as their best option for sealing the breach. Use whatever sealing magic you have. To her credit, the Elven executive responded instantly, barking orders to her mage contingent as they began an intricate group casting. Streams of magical energy flowed toward the dimensional opening, forming latticed patterns that resembled simplified versions of the seal work inscribed throughout the ruins. Naruto maintained pressure against the creature, sage-enhanced strength preventing it from regaining purchase in their dimension. As Riveria's magic began constraining the rift's edges, he executed a perfect backward flip, hands forming new signs midair. Wind style. Vacuum sphere. He announced, expelling multiple compressed air bullets that struck the retreating monster with precision, forcing it completely back into its home dimension as the rift began contracting under Riveria's magical assault. Landing gracefully despite the massive chakra expenditure, Naruto maintained Sage Mode while monitoring the dimensional closure. When the final seam of reality sealed with an audible snap, he allowed the Atur energy to dissipate gradually from his system, returning to normal sensory parameters. Silence fell across the ruins as both research team and Loki Familia processed what they'd witnessed. Naruto remained centered, breathing evenly while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. The demonstration had exceeded his planned limitations, but the alternative would have resulted in casualties he couldn't accept. Riveria finally spoke, her voice carrying subtle undercurrents of awe despite her composed exterior, was not magic as we understand it in Orario. No, Naruto acknowledged simply. It wasn't. Lenora approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity evidently overwhelming any residual fear. Your physical attributes changed. The pigmentation around your eyes, your movement speed, your strength parameters, all enhanced beyond previous demonstrations. A technique from my homeland, Naruto explained, providing minimal but truthful information. It allows temporary harmonization with natural energy to enhance physical and spiritual capabilities. Without incantation, without a falna, without divine blessing, Thorn added, visibly recalibrating his understanding of their escort's abilities. Remarkable doesn't begin to describe it. Riveria signaled her team to maintain their positions while she approached Naruto directly. Despite her slender build and seemingly delicate features, her presence carried undeniable authority tempered by ancient wisdom. Loki will be most interested to hear of this encounter, she stated, studying him with renewed intensity. Your abilities exceed even the more colorful rumors circulating through Orario. I did what was necessary to protect everyone present, Naruto replied evenly. Nothing more. Indeed. A subtle smile touched her lips. Just as we did what was necessary to investigate potential threats to Orario, despite guild restrictions. Their gazes held for a measured moment, mutual recognition of you. N spoke in depths beneath diplomatic exteriors. Finally, Riveria inclined her head slightly. 2 hours, as requested, she conceded with surprising grace. My team will establish a perimeter at Aproper IATE distance to monitor for additional breaches while your researchers complete their documentation. Following which, we would appreciate opportunity to examine the ruins ourselves. Acceptable, Naruto agreed, recognizing the reasonable compromise. Though I recommend caution with the central chamber. Its sealing mechanism appears keyed to specific energy signatures we haven't fully decoded. We'll proceed with appropriate protocols, Riveria assured him, turning to issue instructions to her team. As Loki's adventurers reorganized into observation positions at respectful distance, Naruto rejoined the research team, who immediately bombarded him with questions about his abilities and the dimensional entity they'd encountered. I understand your scientific curiosity, he addressed them collectively. But analyzing that creature or my techniques isn't our current priority. We have limited time to complete your primary research objectives before departing. Though clearly burning with unanswered questions, the researchers acknowledged his logic and returned to their documentation with renewed focus. Naruto created fresh shadow clones to maintain security while personally examining the dimensional rift location for residual effects. The area where the breach had occurred retained distinctive energy patterns, chakra signatures unlike anything native to this world, yet also different from his own dimensional origin. The multiverse theory Sasuke had once explained suddenly felt less theoretical and more tangibly relevant to his current circumstances. The creature recognized the opening immediately. Kurama noted gravely, it possessed intelligence beyond instinct. And targeted this dimension specifically, Naruto added. It wasn't random movement, it saw the opening and deliberately attempted transition. Which suggests either desperation in its home dimension or awareness that other realms might be more hospitable. Neither possibility offered much comfort. If dimensional boundaries were weakening enough for conscious entities to identify and exploit transition points, the implications extended far beyond academic research interest. Yuto maintained vigilant observation throughout the remaining research period, integrating information from his clone network with his own enhanced senses. Loki's expedition honored their agreement, maintaining distance while establishing their own monitoring protocols. Occasional glances exchanged with Riveria suggested mutual professional respect despite their competing objectives. When the archers finally completed their essential documentation, Thorn approached Naruto with uncharacteristic hesitation. We've gathered critical data about the ruins, structure and energy patterns, he reported. But the central chamber remains inaccessible without understanding the activation mechanism. Naruto studied the sealed doorway contemplatively. The spiraling patterns had become increasingly familiar during their investigation, their fundamental principles aligning with Fuinjutsu concepts he'd studied under Jiraiya's guidance. The resonance formula appears keyed to specific chakra, energy signature, he corrected himself. Without the correct harmonic frequency, forced entry would likely trigger defensive mechanisms or destroy whatever contents the chamber protects. Agreed, Lenora joined them, adjusting her glasses. Though I believe you might possess compatible energy patterns based on how the inscriptions reacted to your presence during observation. Naruto had noticed the subtle luminescence that occasionally manifested when he approached certain seal patterns, further evidence of potential connections to his dimensional origin. Testing that theory involves significant unknown variables, he cautioned. Better to document what we can access safely and return with specialized equipment for the central chamber. Though visibly disappointed, the researchers accepted his recommendation. As they packed their documentation materials, Riveria approached their position, maintaining appropriate diplomatic distance. My team is prepared to assume investigation responsibilities, she announced formally. We've detected no additional dimensional instabilities during our monitoring. We're withdrawing as agreed, Naruto confirmed. Though I recommend establishing communication protocols between our teams in case of emergency. These phenomena have proven unpredictable. Riveria nodded approvingly at his professional suggestion. Agreed. We'll maintain Mesa Jing crystal connection with your group until you reach safe distance. As final preparations for departure concluded, the Elven executive addressed Naruto directly, pitching her voice for his ears alone. Loki will want to meet you personally after this. Prepare yourself for an invitation that won't accept refusal gracefully. I expected as much, Naruto replied with resigned understanding. Gee, odds rarely observe unusual events without seeking direct involvement. Something like genuine amusement flickered in Riveria's ancient eyes. You speak as though you have experience with divine curiosity. Let's just say pattern recognition transcends dimensional boundaries, he answered cryptically, earning a raised eyebrow from the perceptive elf. Their departure proceeded without incident, Naruto maintaining enhanced awareness through his clone network as they navigated back toward Orario. The researchers continued processing their observations during travel, occasionally consulting him regarding specific energy interactions they'd documented. By evening, they'd reached the same clearing where Riza's forest protectors had intercepted them previously. Naruto established secure param-eter arrangements while the researchers prepared camp, their excitement over their discoveries manifesting in animated technical discussions around the evening fire. The inscriptions definitely predate any known Orario magical system, Lenora explained, spreading rubbings across improvised table space. Yet they function on principles that somehow interact with current magical frameworks. It's as though they represent a foundational language from which our systems evolved, or were derived. The architectural elements suggest nonlinear design philosophy, Thorne added, indicating structural diagrams. Spaces arranged to channel energy rather than merely contain physical activities. Like the dungeon itself, Finn observed thoughtfully. That comparison captured Naruto's attention as he maintained perimeter awareness. You believe these ruins might connect to the dungeon's origins? It's speculative, Lenora acknowledged, but the energy signatures share fundamental harmonics with dungeon emanations. Despite significant differentiation in expression patterns, as though they might share ancestral developmental origins, Thorne elaborated, while evolving along different trajectories. The implications aligned with Naruto's growing suspicions that this world's dungeon might represent another form of dimensional nexus, perhaps artificially constructed for purposes lost to current understanding. If so, his arrival through dimensional transition might connect to these ancient systems in ways neither he nor Orario's current inhabitants fully comprehended. Their discussion continued late into evening before exhaustion finally claimed the researchers. Naruto maintained vigilant watch throughout the night, processing the expedition's discoveries while monitoring for potential threats. By morning, they resumed their journey toward Orario, arriving at the northern gate by late afternoon without encountering significant obstacles. Aina Tool awaited their return, our professional demeanor barely containing obvious curiosity as they reported to guild headquarters. The researchers immediately disappeared into conference rooms with senior guild officials, leaving Naruto to deliver his security assessment directly to Aina in a private consultation chamber. So, she began once privacy enchantments had activated. I understand you encountered Loki Familia during your expedition. News travels fast, Naruto observed with dry resignation. Messaging crystals travel faster, Aina corrected. The guild received communications from both Riveria Leo's ALF and OU. Our research team regarding the dimensional incident. The situation was handled without casualties, Naruto stated simply. Yes, Aina studied him with new intensity. Through your intervention G abilities that, according to multiple witnesses, significantly exceed what you've previously demonstrated. Naruto met her gaze steadily. I utilized techniques appropriate to the threat level. The LTER native would have resulted in casualties among both research personnel and Loki's expedition team. I'm not criticizing your decision, Aina clarified. The guild appreciates your protection of our researchers. However, the political implications of your demonstrated capabilities have escalated certain situations. Meaning gods who were merely curious are now actively interested, Naruto translated. Precisely. Aina produced a folder containing what appeared to be formal correspondence. The guild has received 3 separate audience requests from major familial leaders since rapport TS of the dimensional incident reached Orario. Specifically, communications from Freya, Loki, and Hermes. I'm not interested in joining any familia, Naruto stated firmly. The guild respects your position, Aina assured him. However, maintaining complete independence while operating within Orario becomes increasingly complex when multiple powerful familias develop active interest in an individual. Suggesting what, exactly? Aina chose her words carefully. Strategic engagement might prove more beneficial than attempted isolation. Controlled interactions with selected familia leaders could establish boundaries while satisfying minimum curiosity requirements. Political theater. Naruto summarized, memories of similar diplomatic maneuvering among hidden villages surfacing in his mind. A pragmatic approach to Orario's reality, Aina corrected gently. Gods can be persistent when their interest is captured. Meeting certain curiosities directly often proves more effective than avoidance, which typically intensifies divine fascination. Naruto considered her counsel thoughtfully. His shinobi training included diplomatic protocols for engaging potential allies and adversaries. Establishing controlled parameters for interaction rather than allowing others to define engagement terms. What would you recommend specifically? He asked finally. Freya has extended invitatio to a gathering at her mansion tomorrow evening. Many familia leaders will attend. Aina produced an elegant invitation card with silver embossing. The guild suggests accepting this particular invitation as it allows observation of multiple interested parties simultaneously within neutral social context. While they all observe me, Naruto noted with mild irony. Indeed, the half-elf's expression held sympathetic understanding. Such is the reality of possessing exceptional abilities in a city ruled by beings who collect exceptionalism like precious gems. After further discussion of political nuances and behavioral expectations, Naruto departed guild headquarters with the ornate invitation secured in his equipment pouch. Evening had settled over Orario, lanterns illuminating cobble-stone streets as adventurers and citizens conducted their nightly business beneath Babel Tower's watchful presence. His path toward his apartment took him near the hostess of fertility, its warm light and cheerful noise offering unexpected appeal after days in wilderness conditions. Deciding that mission debriefing merited proper meal and relaxation, Naruto altered course toward the establishment. The tavern's familiar atmosphere enveloped him as he entered, conversational hum, clinking dishware, the distinctive aromas of Mia's renowned cuisine. Several patrons glanced his way with new interest, suggesting rumors of his expedition had already circulated throughout Orario's adventurer community. Welcome back, Ryu's calm voice greeted him as she appeared with practiced serving efficiency. Your usual corner table is available. Thank you, Naruto replied with genuine appreciation for her normal treatment amid the curious stares. Once seated, he ordered a substantial meal and hot tea, allowing tension to gradually release from his posture as he settled into the tavern's comfortable ambiance. Ryu returned with his order, placing it before him with characteristic precision before addressing him directly. I understand congratulations are in order, she observed quietly. Successfully completing your first guild mission while handling unexpected familia interference and dimensional entities qualifies as impressive even by Orario standards. Word really does travel impossibly fast here, Naruto sighed, though without real frustration. The hostess serves information alongside meals, Ryu reminded him with subtle humor. I've heard 12 different versions of your encounter with Loki familia today alone, ranging from diplomatic negotiation to epic battle for territorial control. The truth lies somewhere between those extremes, Naruto acknowledged, sampling his meal gratefully. Though there was a dimensional incident that required intervention. So I gathered from more reliable sources. Ryu's expression held genuine concern beneath her composed exterior. You've attracted significant attention from powerful interests. More than would be wise for someone in your position. So the guild has informed me. Naruto indicated the invitation visible in his jacket pocket. They've recommended strategic engagement rather than attempted avoidance. Freya's gathering. Ryu nodded with understanding. A logical starting point, though not without risks. Her events typically serve multiple agendas beneath their social veneer. Any specific advice for navigating divine social politics? Naruto asked, valuing her perspective over formal guild protocols. Ryu considered thoughtfully before responding. Speak honestly but selectively. Gods value authenticity while respecting strategic omission. They've mastered both over millennia. Avoid commitments, even seemingly casual ones. In divine politics, implied agreement often becomes binding expectation. Noted. Naruto appreciated her practical counsel. Will you be working tomorrow evening? I might appreciate friendly conversation afterward. Something almost like warmth flickered in Ryu's typically reserved expression. My shift concludes at midnight. I sometimes walk along the western wall afterward. The view of moonlight on Lake Grisna proves calming after busy evenings. The erect confirmation of her availability brought unexpected comfort. I'll keep that in mind. As Ryu departed to attend other patrons, Naruto noticed a figure approaching his table, a young woman in distinctive Eastern-style clothing. Her dark hair gathered in a practical ponytail. Her movement displayed the balanced grace of formal combat training, while her expression held determined purpose beneath polite exterior. Excuse me, she began with a formal bow that confirmed her Eastern cultural origins. You are Naruto Uzumaki, yes. The independent contractor who recently returned from the northern expedition. Word truly does travel at impossible speeds in this city, Naruto remarked, studying her with professional assessment. Her stance, equipment quality, and the subtle magical enhancements visible on her blade marked her as the Loki Familia member Ryu had previously identified, Yamato Makoto. Orario thrives on information, she replied with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her cautious eyes. I am Yamato Makoto of Loki Familia. I hope I'm not disturbing your meal. Not at all, Naruto gestured to the empty chair across from him. Though I suspect this isn't a chance encounter. Makoto took the offered seat with graceful efficiency. You're perceptive. I've been hoping to speak with you since witnessing your training demonstration last week. She leaned forward slightly, dropping her voice. Your techniques. They resemble lost arts from my homeland. Arts I believed extinct for generations. Her sincerity appeared genuine despite her obvious familia allegiance. Naruto considered his response carefully, recognizing the potential value in controlled information exchange with someone possessing relevant cultural knowledge. Your homeland being the Far East, I understand. Yes. Excitement briefly overcame her professional composure. A region called Shinori in the Eastern Archipelago. Our warrior traditions included energy manipulation methods similar to what you demonstrated, though none as advanced as your techniques. The name meant nothing to Naruto, though the concept of parallel cultural development across dimensions aligned with theoretical frameworks Sasuke had once explained during their dimensional explorations. I'd be interested to learn more about these traditions, he offered truthfully. My training comes from elsewhere, identifying similarities might prove informative. I would welcome such exchange, Makoto replied eagerly before tempering her enthusiasm with careful qualification. Though I should acknowledge that my goddess expressed specific interest in arranging this conversation. Loki. Naruto nodded, appreciating her honesty. I expected as much after our encounter with Riveria at the ruins. Our executive was most impressed by your handling of the dimensional entity, Makoto confirmed. Few individuals earn Riveria-sama's respect so quickly. The situation required decisive action rather than territorial disputes. Naruto explained simply. I prioritize protecting all present regardless of familia affiliation. Makoto studied him with renewed intensity. That philosophy itself differs significantly from Orario's typical competitive framework. Most high-level adventurers prioritize familia advantages in their decision-making. Where I come from, mission parameters and civilian AFETY took precedence over organizational competition, Naruto explained, providing truthful information without specifics. Old habits persist. Admirable habits, Makoto observed sincerely. Potentially why multiple familias now seek your allegiance. I'm not looking to join any familia, Naruto stated firmly but without hostility. So I've heard. A hint of genuine amusement touched Makoto's expression. Which makes you even more interesting to certain goddesses who collect exceptional individuals. She rose with another formal bow. I've taken enough of your meal time. Would you see on-site meeting for proper training exchange? Perhaps tomorrow morning at the Eastern practice fields. Naruto weighed the invitation against potential benefits and risks. Controlled interaction with Loki Familia members might provide valuable cultural and technical information while satisfying some curiosity without direct engagement with their goddess. I'd find that valuable, he agreed. Eighth bell acceptable, perfect. Makoto's formal demeanor briefly gave way to genuine enthusiasm. Until tomorrow, then. As she departed, Naruto noted Ryu observing their interaction with professional assessment from across the tavern. When their eyes met briefly, she gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval at his handling of the encounter. The remainder of his meal passed without further interruption, though he remained conscious of continued observation from various patrons. By the time he departed the hostess, night had fully claimed Orario, stars emerging above the city's illuminated skyline. Rather than returning directly to his apartment, Naruto found himself drawn toward Babel Tower, the massive structure rising from the dungeon's entrance at Orario's heart. The tower's WHITE stone gleamed in moonlight as he approached, its impossibly tall spire reaching toward stars that still felt foreign despite his weeks in this world. Finding a quiet vantage point atop a nearby building, Naruto settled into meditative posture, allowing his senses to expand through the city around him. The complex tapestry of lives unfolding beneath his awareness, adventurers returning from the dungeon, merchants securing their shops, families sharing evening meals, gods playing their immortal games, reminded him painfully of similar evenings spent watching over Konoha from Hokage Mountain. Dwelling on what's lost serves no purpose, Kid, Kurama observed gently within his mind. I know, Naruto acknowledged. But remembering keeps them alive in some small way. True enough, though creating new connections matters too. Naruto considered the fox's wisdom thoughtfully. Despite his instinctive resistance to forming attachments in this unfamiliar world, he found himself developing genuine connections. Ryu's quiet strength and perceptive counsel, Aina's professional guidance tempered with concern, even Makoto's earnest interest in cultural exchange. Not replacing what was lost, he murmured aloud. But perhaps building something new. The night breeze carried no answer save the distant sounds of Orario's eternal activity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, training with Makoto, navigating Freya's gathering, balancing multiple divine interests without committing to any. Yet for this moment, watching moonlight play across this strange city that somehow began. Feeling less foreign with each passing day, Naruto allowed himself the luxury of cautious hope. Perhaps surviving wasn't the only option remaining to him after all. Chapter 2 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.